Ladies and gentlemen, we have for you live the XCP Counterparty versus Ethereum Battle Royale featuring last week's heavyweight champion, Joe Public Enemy #1 Looney.
Yes, just in time.
Along with his new counterpart, Thundering Theo Goodman.
Yo, what's up? Yeah.
Versus Tommy, Pretty Boy Nicholas, and Jam Master Jay Wall. Welcome back. We have
somebody's got the YouTube clip playing in the background.
Yeah, my bad. We have myself, DJ Jay Skrilla, and Cynthia Gayton here.
Yep. AOTB in the house.
Bringing you the live discussion, battle royale style. And I want to start off by saying I made a battle royale token today for the event and for all the events that we're going to do in this debate scenario, which I think is a fun way to talk about collectibles, crypto, blockchain, etc., in a fun manner. And so I used XCP, I used Counterparty to make it. It took me 3 minutes, and I made the token. And it's going to be the token that you all receive, whoever wins. So maybe we could talk about that to start off. The ease of use. And I've used Ethereum and Counterparty for my crypto art, so I'm neutral in this. I know a little bit about both sides. But I'd like to say that the user experience for myself, just to create a token like that, I can do that using Counterparty. I was wondering maybe, Tommy, if you could speak on that.
Yes, so I can't speak on that. And I, obviously I'll reiterate, like I'm going to be on the Ethereum side of this debate. I think Counterparty has a lot of value, but I think Ethereum is the obvious winner for token creation and just general sort of non-currency use cases. But the coolest thing about the Counterparty ecosystem is that it's an older, more mature, more specific ecosystem for token creation. Basically, what I mean by that is like the Ethereum network is a blockchain separate from the Bitcoin blockchain. It is mined separately from the Bitcoin blockchain. It's its own thing, and it's designed around this idea of being like a global supercomputer, where instead of basically just having a currency that you exchange, you have little bits of compute. You basically have little scripts that live in the blockchain, and then you could pay miners to run them, and they could do lots of stuff. That's the core idea of Ethereum. Counterparty actually trying to make that happen too, but Counterparty's original idea was basically not to be a separate blockchain, and instead to use the metadata fields on the Bitcoin blockchain to create new tokens. Basically, instead of just having the ability to have Bitcoin, you'd have the ability to have like X asset, asset 1, asset 2, or in the case of, the use case I know the best, Rare Pepe, like on the Rare Pepe wallet, you could have like DJ Pepe, you could have like a Hair Pepe, and each of those could have different quantities, and they have their own tokens which are tradable peer-to-peer, but the transactions ultimately settle on the Bitcoin network. And so, interestingly enough, I thought about your question before we started this, which is there something like Counter Wallet, or I forget what the website for actually the GUI for creating tokens that you'd use is, but is there like a simple user interface for creating tokens on the Ethereum blockchain of different types? And the answer is not that I know of. You can pretty easily create a token on rareart.io, but right now they haven't opened up that user interface for anyone. You have to let them do it at the moment, and then soon it'll be available for anybody. And then there's a couple other interfaces like Super Rare and maybe a couple others that I don't consider to be, or their interfaces don't do exactly what you would want to do. And so it's interesting that it's the case. I don't think it is the case that you could have done what you wanted, which was to visit a website, create a token, and have it distributable on a blockchain people trust in just a couple of minutes. My guess as to why that is one is like Ethereum is a little newer, but also two is like, unlike Counterparty, you can do whatever the fuck you want on Ethereum, almost to the detriment of the user. So the idea that you could create a user interface just for creating a token on Ethereum is kind of counter. It's like it's counter to how Ethereum people think about Ethereum, which is there's a million types of tokens that can do a million types of things. How could you create a user interface that just created standard tokens really, really easily? You'd have to create an interface that creates a certain type of token, right? In the case of what you're trying to do, maybe a digital collectible, which is what Rare Art Labs, you know, the company or the protocol I helped at least come up with the concept for, is going to do. But it's not live yet. And even when it is live, it'll probably be a little half-baked compared to what exists on Counterparty. So if you're going to try to force me to make a pro-Counterparty argument to start the debate, which it seems like you are, I would say, no, you could not do that, but you certainly could create something that could do that.
All right. Let's hear it from James real quick. He got a scrunchy face over there. Let's hear from James real quick on that point.
Scrunchy face. I'm just glad and honored, really, to be chosen as Tommy's partner in this debate. I come from a little more of a impartial, independent background, I guess, but I'm really just curious to see or hear what Joe has to say, in terms of his precise reasons why Counterparty is better than Ethereum. Other than ease of use right now is definitely a good point to make, but the potential for more complex structures is just way more exciting, I'd say.
Theo.
I heard that you could make Ethereum tokens really easy on Archetype. So yeah, I don't know. Make tokens on Ethereum similar to what we know on Counterparty. It's what the good thing about the graphical interface of Counterparty also for beginners is that it's easy to make what I call a human readable token. It doesn't, there's also an alphanumeric token in Counterparty that's free to make, but it's easy to make a token with a name like Theos or Bitcoins or Mafia Cash or Pepe Cash, and it's actually PEPCASH. And if I make one on Ethereum, it's like 0x Vitalik XY525282 every time. And so just that little tiny bit in the graphical interface, I think that makes it a lot easier to understand when you're really starting out the whole thing. I'm sure that someone could make a graphical interface for Ethereum for that. But that being said, the thing is that since me and Joe have used Counterparty for a while, every time you've used something for a while, that's always going to be easier for you. It's probably for Jay Skrilla too. You're just like, oh, it was easy for me to make a token in Counterparty. Well, we've just been making them for longer. But even with that on top of it, it's just easier too. Even if I try to be, non-biased, it's just easier, and I don't have to like copy part of a smart contract and hope that's the right one and paste it in this weird part of the wallet and then just like pray that this smart contract voodoo really works and I didn't hack myself or something. Unless you're really a programmer, how are you going to know you're copying the right smart contract? So it's kind of it's a lot less complicated in those facts.
All right, so let's move on here. Joe, probably the public enemy number one is Ethereum. Give me one thing that you would give a pro on for Ethereum.
Hold on one second. Thanks. So you want me to give a pro on Ethereum?
Yeah, like we just started off with those two guys both kind of gave the nod to XCP for user friendliness. Do you have anything that you could give? Pro over XCP for Ethereum?
Yeah, I think if you want to like build a real decentralized pyramid scheme, you should definitely use Ethereum.
Jeez. Wow.
I would agree with that 100%.
Talk about it.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. The proof of weak hands and all the kind of clones of that, I think, are actually really innovative. It's probably like the only real like dApps that exist right now. I mean, assuming there's no built-in bugs like the first one, but I guess we'll never know until it happens. But for now, they look pretty good. I mean, I like them. I think they're great.
All right, hold on. James, are those the only dApps built on Ethereum right now that are working?
I'd say they've replaced CryptoKitties as the majority of the active network usage. But yeah, it's very similar to a Ponzi scheme, but different. And then I like to separate two concepts that are required for that kind of idea. One being the continuous token model, which just creates the tokens based on some function. And then the bonding curve, which determines the price based on the supply. So it's just like a constant product market maker that relies on a reserve pool and a ratio to determine the price based on how many people are buying in. So there's a curve that says that the price is always going to increase as more people buy in. And that sounds a lot like a Ponzi scheme to me. But it's not fundamentally fraudulent, is what I've been told.
Right. All right. So
It's a provably fair Ponzi scheme.
Right. You know what you're getting into. It's like gambling.
all right. So for crypto art, tokens and crypto art, where should we start with Ethereum versus XCP? Cynthia, do you have something you want to chime in on?
Well, the thing I'm concerned about is understanding the relationship of the art to the token, because what I am seeing and what I read is that there's some confusion about whether the art is necessary for the token, whether the art can exist separate from the token. It was suggested that I read a license agreement recently, and I took a look at it, and it appears that the license agreement is a suggestion that the art is licensed separate from the token, which is not what people think. And I don't know if that is an Ethereum versus counterparty issue, if it's a conceptual issue, because to me, if you have a token and then you have to enter into a separate license for the art versus the use of the token, I think it's confusing, because I know for myself what I am interested in generally with the art elements is I'm interested in the art. The token itself is kind of cool, but I like I buy things based on the visual aspect of it. And if it does stuff, that's cool, but I'm interested in the art. So that's what I'm wondering is there, because talking to Joe, it seems it's all integral. It's all the art and the token are embedded in itself, and then it's not a separate thing. And then when I read the licensing agreements with regard to the art and the tokens, it seems like they are separate, and they are things that can be exchanged in and out of a token. So perhaps there's a way to explain that in context of counterparty in Ethereum.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like Joe is the right person to start addressing that. I mean, Joe's the one who even kind of like best articulated to me the first, like, the art is the token concept, which I might add to, but this might be a good chance for that spiel just to start.
Yeah, I should do my spiel.
I like the spiel.
Not everybody's heard it.
Yeah, I think, Cynthia, you're right. It's not really it's not really an Ethereum versus counterparty question. It's kind of a more general, but because this is art on the blockchain, I think it makes sense to cover it. Yeah, I think the idea of having rare digital art is very nuanced, and I don't think most people understand it completely. I don't know that I understand it completely, but I have a better picture than most. My feeling on the whole thing is that when you collect rare digital art, the thing you're collecting is the token. And whether you collect it because you like the picture associated with it, or you like the artist that issued it, or you like the fact that they only issued 1, or they only issued 10, or they issued it on Ethereum, or they issued it on Counterparty, that all plays into kind of why you would buy it. But the thing that you actually own is a token, in the same way that the thing you own, if you own Bitcoin, is Bitcoin, right? It's like, it's a thing that doesn't have a form, a physical form. So we do the best we can, and we represent it visually. With the case of Rare Pepes or Rare Digital Art, the issuer has the chance and the opportunity to really represent it visually, or they could represent it with sound, or they could represent it with video. I mean, really it's wide open what they want to do. And at the end of the day, it comes down to whoever created it, kind of what they say the art piece is. I think Theo said it pretty good in a chat the other day. The token is Mona Lisa's lips. So if you were to buy the Mona Lisa with her lips cut out, maybe you want that. But if you want the whole Mona Lisa, you want her lips too. So I think that's about as kind of short, concise I can give a definition on it. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, really the thing that you're collecting, and the thing that you're holding, and the thing that you have the ability to send around and trade and sell is a token.
So you should, in from a functional perspective, if you are entering into an agreement with regard to this purchase, it should be the thing in its entirety, not parts of it.
Well, unless what you want is parts of it, right? So it can be whatever you want it to be.
No. If you as the purchaser and you see this manifestation of the art in the token, and what you are agreeing to is the entirety of it, not just the art, right? That seems to be what you're saying. If
that's your understanding of what you're buying, then you should make sure to communicate that to the person selling it, and make sure you guys are on the same page.
And this is
different pretty much right now still, right?
Yeah. Well, here's my fundamental thing like about this entire debate is there are some technical limitations to the two platforms. The big thing with Counterparty is you need Counterparty XCP, whatever you call it, and Bitcoin to create most of the assets, and to even interact with some of the, at least some of the theoretical protocols, and then some of the current protocols. So you need these two currencies, and with Ethereum, you probably just need the one, unless the platform forces you to use a second. But usually you just need the one. And there's some technical shit that is important, and I want to get to that because I think it'd be a disservice if we don't get to that. But the biggest thing is the communities. Like the Ethereum community believes in decentralized, like fundamentally believes in decentralized apps. It believes in believes in like a multi-token world. I hope it stops to believe in a multi-currency world, but it certainly believes in a multi-token world where there will be lots of assets, and there will be lots of like smart contracts, and there'll be all sorts of stuff that's not just ETH, the token. And that's why.
Can we define what?
That can't happen on chain either, like just like a Bitcoin network, right? With Ethereum, if that was really a free flowing thing going on, like you're talking about.
Well, hey, Joe, what were you gonna?
Can you define what you mean by decentralized applications?
Well, what the community at least ostents is, the gray paper or whatever, the sort of like what the community purports to believe and is rallied around is largely, if not fully, decentralized compute and various tokens, which like truly, at least the aspects that are important are truly like held on a consensus mechanism blockchain. And then when you want to run them, you have to pay the consensus mechanism blockchain, and you don't know who's going to do the stuff, and they're going to give you back the answer. And theoretically, believes in applications and tokens that could be replicated by multiple parties And there's at least nothing about the core thing that is handled by one central entity. So that's a good example of that would be like a DEX. I know there's DEXs on Bitcoin, so that's bad, but it's just an easy to understand example. Like the CryptoPunks DEX, for example, originally when they made it on Ethereum, the buying and selling of CryptoPunks, nobody could recreate that stuff because there was parts of their application that were central, that was too central, like that only CryptoPunks had access to. They released a new version of the protocol where that wasn't the case, and now there's like the CryptoPunks website, there's competing websites, and they all do exactly the same thing because they're all just hitting the blockchain. That's what the Ethereum community at least is rallied around, theoretically purports to believe. But what I was going to say, and I think what you would probably get to, is that's what they purport to believe. But who it's attracted is some people that believe that and really, really believe it and want to really do that. That's like truly, at least as decentralized as possible, functions and applications that truly can be recreated by anybody and can't be controlled by anybody. But what we got is CryptoKitties, which, a lot of us have been pretty quiet about, but like over the last couple of weeks has just become like clear as like a legitimate dumpster fire, truly an embarrassment. Like nothing, it was never decentralized almost in any way. And now they're introducing legal documents into they're introducing all this shit that makes absolutely no sense. And so what we get is this situation where somebody, even like you, Joe, or anybody really interested in this is looking at it and they're saying, well, they told me it was going to be this. And then I'm reading the smart contracts or I'm reading the popular protocols and they have kill switches that are centralized. They have legal documents in the contracts for some reason, like based on US law or like whatever. And so we're in this interesting situation where because Ethereum can do all these things and can attract all these kind of businessy use cases, we've got a lot of people now in the ecosystem who go down a different road. And the best thing about the counterparty protocol, the worst thing about counterparty protocol has things to do with the community, in my opinion. But the best thing about it is clear what it is like exactly what it is. It is nothing other than exactly what it is. And it is rallied around a very, very clear concept, which is, the Bitcoin community's concept of decentralization. There's no muddled decentralization and centralization. In fact, I tried to look for a way that I could do something centralized on Counterparty, and I found it. I did not see how I could. Maybe you could tell me, but I could not see how I could really even do that. So that's the give and take, in my opinion.
A really nifty thing that you could do on Counterparty that is niftily centralized is that you can leave there's an option where you can generate more tokens of a certain token. So if I release 999 Theos, and I could leave it open, and then later I could mint more Theos. So it's not deflationary and it's not limited. But if I check a box and say it's limited, then that's irreversible. But a centralized thing, for example, would be like, I could issue more later. Kind of like central bank of Theo, basically, where I could say, okay, I need to issue more into supply. I could leave that open. That would be really clear for everyone to see because every counterparty explorer, has that as, one of the key adjectives of this token. Is it divisible and can more be minted? It's pretty simple. It's pretty clear that from the beginning. So I think that's a real simple centralized use that is pretty wide open for anyone that wants to get real nifty with it.
That is nifty.
Yeah. And okay, go on, Skrilla.
No.
I just wanted to talk about the Mona Lisa example because I don't really understand it completely. I guess it's a well-intentioned thing because you're trying to, attach the story to the token, but I see them as two separate things, and you can sell it as a meaningful thing attached to the bytes, but really it's an entirely separate thing. It's an incremental improvement, and we kind of lose sight of what it's for, which is creating unique value representation, whereas most people are focused on attaching pre-existing works to the blockchain. And that gets tricky because if somebody beats you to it, they can try to prove they were the original creator and sell that token.
So what do you mean by value representation?
So that non-fungible token is what's valuable. You know, if you try to tokenize a physical print or a digital painting, you know, that's the token is the limited asset. It's not the copy and paste ability of the digital asset or the, you know, fraudulent nature of the counterfeit art market or whatever. You know, the idea of the print is it's already a token in itself. It's an object. But if you objectify some digital artwork, it has the same kind of problem because it's just not the same thing as the token.
I think that it's
are her lips. They're not a token.
Yep. Okay, but it's part of the complete artwork itself. If I'm an artist and I generate the token, or if I have the intent to generate a token with the artwork, well, that's a complete part of the concept. So it's all about the intent of the artist and what they're trying to tell everybody. You know, if they're trying. So in my opinion, the token is totally part of the artwork in that sense, because it's just about, you know, what was intended. I mean, I could specifically say this is artwork is called separate and everything is separate in this piece. But I mean, I think unless you do that, in my opinion, it's definitely part of the complete artwork as one complete thing. Because I could also choose to, and in my opinion also, I mean, we're probably going to debate a lot of, get on some technical points, but I think, in my opinion, Samuel Holt says in the comments, this is a really good, I love this is a real good art comment. Are you ready? It's a very nifty one. Theo, there is no complete artwork. That's a very, you know, what is art? That's a very what is art kind of statement, right? You know, but in any case, I think a lot of the debate going on is not based on technicals. It's subjective. So I think a community feeling is subjective. It's very hard to quantify what that means. You know what I mean? That's going to mean something different for people. It's a feeling, I think. So, you know, artists are going to go maybe where they feel most comfortable. Now, it could also be that they feel more comfortable where they're getting a lot of money from. Who knows? It depends on the individual. But I don't think that a lot of the time, I don't think it's based on technicals. It's just based on, well, I know this guy's using Ethereum, or I know this guy's using Bitcoin. So I'm going to use something on that chain because that is what I know. That's all the people I met, you know, are using that. It's not based on technicals. Maybe that's okay. But I don't think that it's always based on, yeah, like this is technically the best chain to use.
Yeah, well, I think those technicals are starting to kind of rear their head in the last couple of weeks in regard to Ethereum and what everybody kind of perceived from certain popular contracts like CryptoKitties. So I think that's a pretty, like, it's a point that's demonstrated itself, and I don't think Theo or I were really that surprised to see something like this happen. Because the point being, I mean, anybody that creates a contract, it's buyer beware, right? Because the average person can't audit that contract. They don't know what's in there. Even a technical person may not be able to audit that contract. They might know enough to be able to see certain functions that might stand out as a little sketchy for something that is claiming to be decentralized and uncensorable. But I think that is a major difference. And Tommy kind of pointed that out when he kind of said Counterparty does one thing and it's very clear about what it does. And I think if you were to present the two together, nothing else withstanding, and you were to explain that to a group of artists, I'm pretty confident they would pick Counterparty, because the thing they're trying to do is they're trying to create this scarce digital thing. And that's what Counterparty does really well.
I'm with you. Here's the double-edged sword of that. The double-edged sword of that is Ethereum. The Ethereum community is still the best, by far, in my opinion, the best served community for believing in a future of rare digital art or like sort of decentralized exchange of rare digital art or anything like that. I think the Ethereum community is better suited for that, and that the Bitcoin community still remains, like, if they understand Rare Pepe specifically and they like that as a way to kind of like shit on Ethereum to say we already did this, they like it for that purpose. But otherwise, they're like openly hostile. Bitcoin maximalists do not believe, by and large, that as they're not Bitcoin blockchain maximalists. They're like Bitcoin, the coin, mining it and turning it into a currency maximalist. But the double-edged sword of that for me as an Ethereum person is then you have to stand up and, if I'm saying that, you have to stand up and explain fucking CryptoKitties to people and how everyone got sold like CryptoKitties is the first, implementation of what we're supposed to be doing on Ethereum. And everything they've done from the time that they launched the contract till now is basically fuck it up. And not only that, do things that make any smart person honestly dubious.
How do they fuck? Can you run it by in case our audience doesn't know?
Yeah. So I mean, here's the thing about the CryptoKitties is, like, I was excited about the CryptoKitties, and I still am. I still love some of the people involved, but they created this stupidest standard in cryptocurrency, the ERC 721 standard, which is basically a way of taking tokens and putting them inside of a contract that somebody can control and distribute, so they can be technically non-fungible, which means one of one, which, by the way, there's been non-fungible tokens in Counterparty for forever. ERC20 tokens can be non-fungible. You just create a supply of one, right? One. Now it can't be one, and then you set the fungibility of the digits to 0 or to 1, or 0 or 1, I forget what it is. And now you've got non-fungible tokens. And everyone got really excited about this. But what was the purpose of that standard? The only purpose of that standard, explicitly from the horse's mouth, was so that CryptoKitties, Axiom Zen, now Dapper Labs, could control the minting solely. They could be the sole controller of the minting and creation of CryptoKitties. That is the purpose of ERC 721, which is the standard that got everyone excited about rare digital art. That is what it's for. It is for centralization. There's other kind of like interesting things about it, which is you have one contract to kind of like deal with as a software developer, and all the underlying assets will be inside of it. That's fine. The purpose of it and the reason it was created was for creating a centralized point of minting and control. And the second thing is that they've introduced a whole bunch of legal docs, including the Nifty license, that says what it is that you own when you own a CryptoKitty. And then they went and trademarked the term Nifty, not Nifty license, not Nifty anything. Nifty, the word Nifty referencing rare digital art, which is why we've been kind of tongue-in-cheek saying the word Nifty on here. And so it's probably the worst time in history for me to be having this debate, because I couldn't be more angry at the kind of like the core poster children of the Ethereum community for basically becoming the poster children of the Ethereum community and doing every single thing that people say people in the Ethereum community were going to do to fuck up the Ethereum. They're going to centralize the shit. They're going to add legal contracts into it. They're going to blah. Well, they did all of it, and they're doing all of it.
Hold on.
I think we should just let Tommy debate himself.
I think your partner's laying it down for you, bro. I think your partner's laying it down.
Well, I mean, it's been a bad week. It's been a bad week.
So you don't
I want to say something on behalf, kind of on the Ethereum side, is you guys are talking about user interface at the beginning, and we're talking about communities, and I'm wondering, is there one Ethereum community? Because it seems like there are several Ethereum communities. And then on the other hand, with the user interface, my thinking when I've been looking at this is, are they thinking that the consumers, the people who are ultimately going to buy these things, can't figure it out? So they have the perception that they're providing a service to purchasers by centralizing it because they think this is what consumers understand, versus, that's because I'm trying to, think through why is the user interface not helpful for your average person, whereas Counterparty isn't. To me, the logical reason would be because they don't think your average consumer is intelligent enough to figure out what to do. Is that a possibility?
What do you think about that, James?
So, okay, James.
Yeah, I mean, I think the basic problem with it is they are advertising it like it's decentralized, and it's really not. It was never intended to be. I think. And
it's a proof of concept. It should have been a proof of
yeah,
concept.
They talk about it because it's.
Yeah, I will say we have an interview coming out with one of the CryptoKitties co-founders in the next day or two that talks about what you just said with the decentralization. He definitely mentions this should be decentralized.
Well, yeah, I'm sure there's a roadmap, and progressive decentralization of your app is great, but it's like their business model is to introduce new like features of the kitties and make those like hype cycle again, and that's just kind of weird. It's not the same as what everyone's excited about, I think, in like the 721 ecosystem, if you could call it that.
What are you excited about?
I'm excited about more complex structures. Like Tommy was saying, if you have ERC20 contract with a supply of one, fungibility, it's just granular. It's like one thing. It's a unique asset. You can do that with the existing standard. And we talk a lot about standards and like the Ethereum request for comments, ERCs, but it's really just all a mess. The reason for a standard is so that exchanges and wallets can all use the same kind of tokens. And so the 721 ecosystem should have been, ushered in by good leadership. You could argue that the CryptoKitties team failed to deliver and took an easy way out, a more immediately profitable way out. So that's kind of why I think people are upset, is they're not really fostering growth the way they could. And everyone's excited about 721 for the wrong reasons.
I think maybe we're being too hard on CryptoKitties. I think they're by far not the only ones using pause and upgrade functions in their contracts. That's pretty prevalent in a lot of contracts that I've seen, even ERC20 contracts. And when you really do start to dig around in this stuff,
can you explain what the pause functionality is to the audience, what that means to the contract real quick?
Yeah, so when you hold tokens on Ethereum, you basically have a balance in a contract that your address controls. So if there's other functions as part of that contract that allow the creator of the contract to essentially freeze all the balances, that's what that pause function is. So yeah, your key controls it when it's not frozen, but somebody can freeze it. So kind of begs the question, why bother with a blockchain in the first place?
Have we seen anything get frozen yet?
Actually, Bancor,
yeah.
They froze some tokens because a bunch of tokens got stolen, and they were able to stop the theft, which is great, right? But I mean, how does then that make Bancor any better than like a Mt. Gox or any other exchange, right? Because if they're in control, then why does it really matter?
I think it has.
Are they in control?
Why not? They were. Well, if it's clear from the beginning from the buyers that they're in control, and that's the issue, then that's fine. I think someone on the ETH side is having trouble with use of technology, as far as sound goes. Tommy, are you trying to talk? Because I see your lips move, but I don't hear you sometimes. Okay. Well. Okay. Did you want it? Because you were like gesturing to say something. I don't hear him. See, ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when you use Ethereum. Technology doesn't work. It's the world computer sometimes, but then when you need to do real simple things like communicate, it doesn't work. But if you want to do world computer self-driving cars, then you need Ethereum. So it just depends on what you want. Okay, go on. Go on. Is it working now?
I'm back.
So I'm kind of confused now. Like, where is the debate going? Because now we've kind of flipped sides in various ways. And
yeah. So I want to say something about community really quick. I know that so community is temporary. It's not a constant. Community can change. And we're going to see what goes on, if the price action goes to, if we go through another nuclear winter where it's, 1 year of no moon and people are just used to Bentley and Lambo, we're going to see what happens to community, and things change. So that is not something that is easy to quantify over time. It's a moving thing. It's an organic thing that changes. But I mean, both communities, Ethereum and Bitcoin, are trying to create tools for people to use, right? And and Counterparty has created tools for we already figured out, a longer time. The tools are maybe the possibility of the tool's functions is limited, but there's a reason for that, because I want the microphone to work when I'm trying to communicate. So I want to do those few things really well, and I want to do them over time well. So that is one of the advantages. And Counterparty has been around long enough where we've seen huge changes in the Bitcoin community, pro token, anti token, and just other stuff in general. The makeup of the community, the size of the communities in Bitcoin, and it's still around. Whereas if I look at it,
what you just spoke on real quick, Theo, some people in Bitcoin are against Counterparty being on Bitcoin. How does that affect Counterparty?
So, I mean, that doesn't mean that Counterparty can't exist just because some people don't like it. I don't know scenario, but it just means that let's see, I think a lot of the debates were more around when Counterparty started, and I haven't heard a lot of comments from big people that are developers. And I've even heard since Rare Pepe, some so-called maximalists, which is a term invented by Vitalik, by the way, have come around and said, well, maybe Rare Pepe is, if there is going to be use for tokens, maybe I like that more. And they like it more than ICOs, because a lot of maximalists hate ICOs, for example,
Right.
But they're like, well, maybe that is an okay use, doing art stuff. So they actually, some of them are coming around saying, hey, that's pretty cool. And so I think that's interesting. And as far as the wallets being hard to use, that's a problem for all communities. I mean, because all new people that are not, freaks like us, because we have to consider ourselves crypto freaks because we can do this stuff so good, they're not going to get the concept of private keys and stuff. So that's a whole new concept. You don't have a helpline that you're fundamentally not going to be able to teach people. And just one more thing on the Nifty thing is that the reason you have all the terms and conditions and all that is because VCs need a way to exit. And if you don't have all those proprietary things, then VCs can't exit. So that's kind of that's the trade-off of doing VC funding versus ICO, is that if you have VC funding, then the VCs need a way out. And if you do ICO, the people that buy the tokens need a way out. And if VCs need a way out, they need the terms and conditions in there, locked in proprietary things.
I wanted to make a distinction between the ICO fundraising versus the VC, because VCs generally have an equity interest, versus ICOs, the people do not have an equity interest in the business itself. So the risk is different, and that's one thing that it's a joke now, but everybody needs to read these things that they are entering into, because people have the comparison between ICOs and owning shares is a wrong way to approach ICO. If you should have understanding that a share interest is an equity interest. If you are trading on the public exchanges for shares, so people need to understand what it is they're actually putting money into. An ICO is, to me, more similar to a Kickstarter, where you don't have any interest in the business itself. You're just making a contribution versus.
Why are ICOs generally on Ethereum? Then we can talk about that. That's the difference between a Counterparty and Ethereum.
Because Joe Lubin will pump your stuff.
Because it opens.
God bless him. Can I make I'll make my no holds barred pro Ethereum pitch, because I do have one and I do believe it. So why are ICOs, and it involves why ICOs are on Ethereum. Here's why I believe Ethereum is the way to go. Assuming that Ethereum remains this is the big assumption, but assuming Ethereum remains a censorship resistant blockchain. Here's why Ethereum. First of all, Ethereum is monocurrency. It at least can be monocurrency, meaning that you can create rare digital art, exchange rare digital art, sell rare digital art using only Ethereum, the ETH currency. There's no need for Bitcoin and the XCP currency to create, exchange, or do anything. It basically is the idea of, in a lot of ways, it basically is Counterparty, and just the one said, wait, this is a big enough idea, it should be its own thing. I know it's not exactly that, but that's one way of thinking about it. The second thing is that you can build as a software developer, you can build your own ecosystem or a shared ecosystem with believers. We see that with ERC 721. A lot of, in my opinion, misguided believers have come together to try to develop a standard, like a standard on top of Ethereum that everyone would build that just shares a lot of similar concepts, but ultimately is up to the integrators. I believe there will be standards, a couple of which I've proposed, but there already are standards, and there will continue to be better standards for rare digital art, which will allow for a more flexible but still information symmetric implementation of rare digital art. What I mean by that is rare digital art, where if you say it adheres to this standard, you can be rest assured that at least the claim is being made that it's decentralized, and somebody could audit that and then say, yes, it's true that this does adhere to that standard. To be very easy to audit. And then you could believe that it's decentralized. So I believe that information symmetry battle between Counterparty and Ethereum is purely a matter of time. There will be a clear, you don't need to worry about it as a non-technical person. This is audited standard for decentralization. And the third is that I believe there is absolutely no chance, none, that the Ethereum community will not continue to develop the functionality, the functionality and ecosystem apps that are required for making, creating, exchanging, creating, exchanging, buying, selling, and creating bids and asks, and other sort of gameplay assets on Ethereum for rare digital art. I believe there's no chance that we will not create those things. That includes wallets. That includes like the MetaMasks of the world, which I think are not actually that great right now, but will continue to be
what's
better.
Up with all the development in Ethereum? We've heard Joe talk about that before.
Well, I'll let Joe jump. I'll stop and let Joe jump in. What Joe wants, and Joe is correct about this, and Joe, this is almost like factually correct. One of Joe's big beefs with Ethereum is nobody ever creates a native wallet on their app. Meaning when you go to the website, you have a wallet. Even if you've never had a wallet before, just by visiting the website, you get a new wallet. And at a minimum, by visiting the website, that would mean for rare digital art, just by going, if we did this on rareart.io, which we should, if you go to rareart.io, at a minimum, day one, if you don't have another wallet anywhere else, you at least have a wallet on rareart.io to which you can receive gifted rare digital art. You don't need to go download MetaMask. You don't need to do anything.
How far away are you from having that?
It's not even on the roadmap, because that's the problem with the Ethereum community is they invest in these third-party wallets and then they just say that's what we're doing. But we could do it.
All right, hold on. Joe, how important is it for a native wallet?
I just want to go through Tommy's points real quick. I was writing them down as he was going through it. The first one he mentioned was that Ethereum doesn't need XCP to create tokens like Counterparty does. Counterparty doesn't need XCP to create tokens. You can create tokens without XCP. They just have a number name instead of a letter name. They're not used a lot, but that's not to say they couldn't be. And that would actually be analogous to the form of an Ethereum token. So I think that comparison's a little off. I will give him that it's much easier to use Ethereum to exchange tokens than it would be to use Bitcoin to exchange Counterparty tokens. That's also possible. It's very clunky, the interface. I built a wallet for that, actually right before Rare Pepe wallet. It's difficult to use, so I'll give him that, but it's not impossible. We just haven't gotten there with an easy UI in Counterparty. The second point was shared standards. You get that implicitly with Counterparty, and I mean, Tommy, it's certainly something he hopes for, but hopes and dreams. We see reality, and we see CryptoKitties. So there's shared standards in that these contracts contain functions that will allow them to easily integrate with each other. But but it also leaves wide open the ability to create any of your own functions. So like kind of like I said before, buyer beware. All Ethereum tokens are not created equal by design. So that's a very difficult concept for users. I mean, it's kind of the more I interact with Ethereum, which I have in the last couple of months, I didn't realize how kind of confusing it really was. So I'd give that one to Counterparty, the shared standards. Number 3 was he's confident that Ethereum will continue to develop applications. That's fine. I'm pretty confident that Counterparty will too. I mean, we've seen a few projects in the last few months, new projects this year, Bitcorns, Mafia Cash. I know Gus down in Mexico was doing something with an art gallery recently. So maybe they're not as prominent, but we all live in our own. Yeah. I think we all live in our own little sheltered worlds, right? So we see the things around us more clearly than we might see something going on in another community, and I think that's fair. That's what we see. But the kind of the last point that we touched on and kind of led into when I started was wallets and wallet design, and that's kind of my forte. My kind of claim to fame was the Rare Pepe wallet, which is a completely custom Counterparty wallet that only lets you trade Rare Pepes. And kind of the reason that I created that was for the very purpose of creating an application-specific wallet that didn't look like a normal wallet and just felt like you were trading Rare Pepes and Rare Pepe cards. And I think I think it was pretty successful. I mean, the project was pretty successful. And I had 0 VC funding. I have a full-time job and I did it in my spare time. So it kind of shows you what's possible on the wallet front. And I guess I'm just pretty disappointed that Ethereum, they have a lot of companies supporting the ecosystem. There's a lot of investment, and all I see is MetaMask. It's insane to me because I built a MetaMask for Counterparty 3 years ago, and I ended up giving up on it because to me it's a little complicated having to have a Chrome browser or Fire. I think MetaMask is on Firefox too, but having a desktop computer and having to download a browser extension that actually gives the extension application a lot of access to what you browse on the internet in general. I don't think a lot of people know that when they download MetaMask. It can pretty much read everything that's on any website you visit. So it's just a little disappointing. I don't think it's very hard. It really isn't very hard. I think any developer that is somewhat competent can download a JavaScript library and create a client-side browser-based wallet. I mean, it's really not a complex thing. So I guess on that front, I'm a little disappointed. But I mean, that's not to say that Ethereum couldn't do it. I don't think that. I mean, they absolutely could. I think MyEther wallet is basically an example of that. But it's not. It's not an application-specific wallet, right? It's just a generic one. It's like a counter wallet. Like MyEther wallet is like the counter wallet of Ethereum, right? So,
so can people build out on MyEther wallet? Can they use that like people build out on counter wallet?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. It's probably open source. I would think it is. A lot of it's client side.
I think James was going to say here.
Joe, you need to check out Coinbase Wallet, formerly known as Toshi. It's like mobile web ready to go. Pretty cool. And it's managing the private keys, like you're saying. That's the definition of a wallet in your book. My definition is really just any contract that stores the value. It can be a hot wallet or a cold wallet. But yeah, that's a long discussion. I think the wallet development space is pretty interesting. But my basic reason for Ethereum is the EVM, the Ethereum virtual machine. And I've got a question for you, which is, can you create multi-dimensional tokens with Counterparty? Because I don't know, and I can explain what that means if you'd like. But, I know we've talked about it before.
That's a question. Yeah. That's a question. Can you do that, Joe or Theo?
I think I think before James gets into it, because I know he's going to explain it, and it is an interesting concept. I think it's kind of important to frame the entire debate in that we are talking Counterparty versus Ethereum, but we're talking tokens Counterparty versus Ethereum, right? Mm-hmm. So Ethereum has a lot of benefits, kind of like I said in the beginning with the decentralized pyramid schemes. And that's not really something you could build on Counterparty as it is now. Counterparty actually almost had an EVM. There is an EVM branch of Counterparty Lib that if anyone wanted to spool up and fork Counterparty and run the EVM, they could go right ahead. In the those in the Counterparty community, and I was a very kind of staunch advocate of not rolling that out. We basically put the brakes on it because we didn't want the security risk. So it's not to say that an EVM was never considered on Counterparty. It absolutely was. And
why wasn't it done? What was the main reason that it couldn't be done?
It could be. It's done. It works.
James, does that interest you? Does EVM on Bitcoin interest you or on Counterparty?
Well, if it's just a fork of the EVM, then it seems like it would need a little bit of testing until I.
But does it interest you as a concept?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it doesn't seem like the 888 token data structure is limited to any sort of network, but you'd have to have some kind of mapping. That's the data type that the 888 structure is made with. Is a nested mapping. So you'd have to, I guess, use Solidity for Counterparty or some other language that has that same functionality. But yeah, I think that would be cool.
Tell us about the multi-dimensional token model.
Sure. Yeah, so it's basically a way to have infinite levels of tokenization within a contract. So it's a nested mapping of the address to a mapping of strings to the unsigned integer, which represents the token. So that's like the hash. That's the token, and you're using identifiers, the strings with imbued value or meaning, to refer to dimension-specific rules or logic, and that gives you that hierarchical design space that's much better in terms of designing crypto systems. So it's like object-oriented programming for engineering these kinds of new structures. And it's all bringing a new idea to interoperable protocols, because you're providing a global access point to any meaningful string and its associated structure. But yeah, so I think that's something that isn't restricted to any sort of blockchain. We're all about pluralism, or blockchains. So yeah, that's the basic spiel. But I love to answer questions.
What would and just give the basic like use case, like the first, the kind of like core, like here's the thing that you would do with this, and of course you do many other things. But
so the original motivation for it was designing a system where everyone had their own token, and really thinking about every context having its own token. And many people watching this might have heard of like the composables idea. I've been calling the 888 structure more of like a disposables, because there could be infinite of them, and they can have whatever structure that designers intend. So it's just a better way to build on a universal protocol. Of course, there will need to be composite designs within that. And so I don't see there's like any real dissimilarity between the two. like in terms of like the end goal, but there is a lot of dissimilarity in terms of the actual structure, because it's just a totally different design pattern. But yeah, that's the use case. It's every context being tokenized so that you can incentivize people by putting liquidity behind their actions, because there's a lot of actions that happen every day.
And that's basically that's the kind of thing that the Ethereum community is very bullish on. Like, I guess, or my perception of the Ethereum community is like these very complex structures that could run mostly in a decentralized context. And like in a world in which, everybody owns crypto and everyone has a crypto wallet, like could actually work, because the liquidity that you're describing would require probably a lot of adoption. But like, that's the kind of thing that like the Ethereum community, when they point their access, in my opinion, towards something, it is that kind of stuff. Whereas if in just my perception of like, if you had to distill the Bitcoin community, they are pointed towards, sound money, right? Like basically like censorship resistant, non-fiat money. And, anything that doesn't kind of like, they're not pointed toward programmable money or any of that stuff. Like they're pointed, towards sound money.
What about,
and that's my
Lightning Network that people
I don't think that's,
but that's sound
that's
money.
not, I get what you mean. It's somewhat true. It's definitely not, I wouldn't definitely say that Bitcoin is totally programmable money. And that's definitely a direction that so-called Bitcoin maximalists, a real nifty direction they're going in. There's all kinds of things that are programmable. There's end-time lock. There's multi-signature that actually works. There's, a lot of things that are definitely programmable money. The thing is, the attitude is just a little bit different. It's just probably all these things. I don't think a lot of people are against a lot of those things. They just don't want to, mess up a running system by introducing features that are not tested for a long time. So the speed of adding some of those things would be a lot slower, but the things would be, probably safer, let's say, than, some of the things. That's just the can of worms that a so-called world computer opens, because a computer can do really bad things too. So, if I had enough gas, I could just, DDoS the whole network and just have a loop running on Ethereum as a smart contract or whatever. So if I'm an artist and I want to make a token, well, what's the best chain for me? The one with the most hash power, the one that's stable, the one that, is it really important transaction costs if I'm doing high value transactions that shouldn't be transacted really often? It's not like I'm buying coffee with this and doing, thousands. I mean, I guess if I have like a game or something, but you see what I mean? So in my opinion, that it's like, okay, do I want to set my stuff in stone on a stone tablet or do I want to put it on an Etch-a-Sketch? No, I'm just joking. That is better than Etch-a-Sketch.
If I had to, if I thought I was going to sell, and I've said this before, by the way, and this is again like on the Bitcoin, I'm going to say a pro counterparty thing. If I thought I was going to sell an artwork for $1 million today, and I wanted the person to believe most confidently that they were going to buy something that would still be around, I would put the token on the Bitcoin blockchain one way or another. I think that's almost a no-brainer. It's been around. It'll be. There's almost no chance that if there's cryptocurrency there will be something called Bitcoin, which will inherit from the what's it called, the Inception block, what's Genesis block. I think that's like almost a sure thing. But if I were an artist who was looking to invest in an ecosystem to create a lot of art, that I wanted to have context that was understood and that would live in sort of this new ecosystem of somewhat or fully decentralized applications and all sorts of other things, I would invest heavily in Ethereum. And that's the distinction I make between those two at the moment. I believe in the future, within like 2 or 3 years, I would make a different decision. And that I would even put the $1 million artwork on Ethereum. But I think right now, it's just like where the ecosystems are, like there is no chance that there will be cryptocurrency, but there won't be Bitcoin. And I think Ethereum, the one caveat I would give to anyone working on it now is, it is the case that I think Ethereum is still in like a little bit of like a who are we moment. we know that we believe as a community in these complex structures and smart contracts and hopefully in decentralized applications. I think anyone making centralized applications on Ethereum is exploiting information asymmetry for a short-term gain. I don't think that's going to last, but it is unclear exactly what form that is going to take, and it's probably a little bit more fragile than the relatively anti-fragile, relatively static, but also relatively resilient, or very resilient, actually kind of world-changingly resilient Bitcoin blockchain.
Don't you think it's?
Go ahead.
Don't you think it's pretty incredible that an artist could create an asset on the same chain that you would recommend an artist create $1 million asset on for just a few dollars?
Yeah, I do. I do think that is also one of the best things about Counterparty. Like, it's not dependent on but like if I was making a token that wasn't just as, because the use case for the $1 million asset, just to explain my thinking a little bit more, is let's say I'm a very famous artist and I'm trying to sell this idea that I'm going to create a cryptocurrency based asset that's going to be around forever. And that's my idea. It's like this $1 million asset, and I'm not just going to spin it up and put it at auction. It's going to sell. I'm going to have to sell this idea. And I'm probably, in my mind, going to want to have been right about that, because I'm not going to want to have to come back in 10 years and say, yeah, that $1 million thing you bought just disappeared. If I was in that exact scenario, and I was very confident that as long as I could convince people that this tokenized representation of my unique work, and if I was doing that, I would not tokenize a work that's ever been, I would natively create it for this purpose. But if I was doing that, I think the most convincing blockchain for that would be the Bitcoin blockchain. I might use the Counterparty protocol for that. I might not, but I would definitely use the Bitcoin blockchain. I think that won't be true in a couple of years, but that is what I would do. If I was doing anything else, anything smaller dollar, and hoping that I could find an ecosystem for my art that would understand it, I would 100% invest in the Ethereum ecosystem, because I believe that is going to be the more fruitful ecosystem. It is now, in my opinion, and it will be in the future.
You got something to add to that, James?
Yeah, I think Ethereum has a lot of questions to answer. They basically raised a bunch of money on this promise of proof of stake, and we're not there yet. So there's still a lot left to be determined in that regard. So I would totally agree. Counterparty is just like a straightforward, easy to use process for tokenizing metadata. If you want to do something more complex, if you're interested in the power of Turing complete validity contracts, definitely learn more about Ethereum. That's the place to start. But I'm not a maximalist of anything but transparency. And my friend and the author of 888, Trevor Overman, he's the one who's taught me a lot about your choices to affect your own perspective and how you can connect with the world and have a better intentionality overall, with sort of omni consideration at the forefront of your mind. So we're just trying to figure out a way to collaborate across all chains and ecosystems, and really bring the whole world into the fold. But yeah, I'm very bullish on Ethereum. But like Joe said in the last debate, or maybe it was on the Yali Rare podcast, there's a lot to be determined, and it might look different in a period of time. TBD is all I got to say on that. But yeah, definitely exciting to be involved with everyone who's coming up with these new ideas, experimenting.
I think it's interesting that James brought up the move to proof of stake for Ethereum, and I think that's a thing probably a lot of artists or just anybody in general thinking about creating tokens, unless they're deep into it, probably has no idea even exists. And that's actually a pretty big deal because it's very likely that that forks the chain.
Right.
And a lot of people are going to have to make some difficult decisions as to whether do I support tokens on both chains because the contracts will exist on both chains, or do I just wait to see what the Ethereum Foundation does, and I just go with what they do.
Well, to be fair, I mean,
it's a
Bitcoin's pretty fork heavy too. I actually agree with you that that's a risk, but I mean, you know, it's not like we haven't been through that with the Bitcoin community.
Yeah, I think forking is a risk with all blockchains.
It is a risk, but think about, I guess, the difference in the Ethereum community. There's a lot of people that will say Ethereum Classic is Ethereum, and they're probably right. Then there's a lot of people that would say Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin, but you couldn't sync a Bitcoin node to the Bitcoin Cash chain from prior to that. So if you want to just look at it technically, I think it's a risk of all blockchains, right? Forking, but an interesting thing with Counterparty in general is Counterparty could fork, right? That's a risk. Bitcoin could fork. That's a risk. But because it uses a federated model, Counterparty itself, it's really up to the individual projects running their version. So there is a lot of benefit to having a protocol that's separate from the base layer chain. You get a lot of flexibility that you wouldn't have otherwise. Counterparty didn't have to make a choice when Bitcoin Cash split. Doing nothing kept us on Bitcoin. If Ethereum splits to proof of stake and proof of work, my guess is if Vitalik wants proof of stake and Vlad wants proof of stake and they get behind it, you're going to split in a way that the major wallets are going to need to update their code to work with the new chain.
Right.
And that's actually an interesting thing. It's easy, I guess, for Ethereum applications that use a major wallet like a Toshi, or I guess it's just called Coinbase Wallet, or MetaMask, because they do it for them. But I think that leads a little more to kind of what's happening in the background, as opposed to having the choice to stick with what you have. And I guess that's kind of a philosophical question, but
I think the key point here is that it is possible to create a decentralized smart contract on Ethereum. It's not always done, and it's often, not advertised honestly, but that's still possible. So that's my argument for why Ethereum is better. Of course, you don't need that to launch a non-fungible token on Counterparty. So, I have all the respect for the giants before us. We're just standing on the shoulders of.
We are 100% standing on the shoulders.
That's very true, and it is kind of funny how MetaMask is like just a weird middleman in this industry where everyone's talking about removing the middleman.
Here's my number one thing for the Ethereum community, though, is that this debate should be a really easy debate to have. It should be Ethereum is the most developer-friendly, programmable, censorship-resistant chain that includes smart contracts and easy token creation. And the community enforces various standards which control for centralization and create information symmetry so that people don't need to worry about when they are or aren't interacting with censorship-resistant centralized smart contracts. And we can't totally say that because, and I think a lot of this has to do with an organization that was the one I'm not going to call up, but is a little bit of too much of the friendliness with the enterprise blockchain world, which is worthless. And we've really, if Ethereum is going to have this debate in a year or 2 years and just have it be a pat, easy debate, it's going to require a lot of policing of that. And it's going to require a lot of creation of standards, audibility, and just information dissemination around when something is centralized.
Who's going to police that?
Well, the community can police it if they actually go about it. And I think the worst thing that we've done, and why you can see I'm really coming after the stuff that CryptoKitties is doing, is I just woke up to it, this week, and I just said, this is not just like, oh, well, they'll kind of figure it out and gradual decentralization and whatever. This is like, it's got to be unacceptable at some point. It's got to probably have been unacceptable earlier than we kind of all got in DMs or got on our little Telegram and said, is this fucking unacceptable? And the answer is, yeah, it's super unacceptable. We needed to be on top of that earlier and not just be like, oh, I'm glad that this is happening.
Tommy, what's the chance that CryptoKitties and Axiom Zen gets $12 million if there's not something like that, though? Like,
I disagree with Theo in the sense that I do not believe, and in fact, I believe that this may hurt their chances at any sort of liquidity in the future. I don't think that any smart blockchain-based investor is trying to get in bed with something that centralizes itself and becomes basically like an app. And if they are, they're making an ass of themselves, because just make an app. Just get off the blockchain and just make an app. And I think Fred Wilson and those guys know better. And there must be at least some internal conversations about sort of gradual decentralization. But I don't give a shit about that. I give a shit about the bad name they're giving us now. I give a shit about the sort of bill of goods that's being sold as a decentralized thing that you actually own that you don't. And I think we need to call it out and say that is not rare digital art. And I'm saying that is not rare digital art, and that is not part of it.
But to be clear, you're saying that CryptoKitties, you don't own them if you think you own them, and that they are not decentralized?
It is literally controlled. They're in any way that I've seen, and I'd love to see somebody come and say either here's the plan for stopping that, or it's actually not even true anymore. But I see absolutely no way in which Axiom or Dapper Labs, whatever it's called, the Axiom Zen spinoff does not completely control your world and your CryptoKitties. They can take them away. They can destroy them. They can take away the images. They can do everything involved with it. I believe the creation exchange and everything is centralized. The only thing that I believe is decentralized is you can take them out of the CryptoKitties wallet and put them in something like OpenSea, or you sell them outside of the contract, outside of the CryptoKitties contract, and they don't control the royalties for that anymore. But I'm not even sure if that's true. You might need to sell them within their DEX thing. But they definitely control the creation and the existence of the CryptoKitties inside the ERC 721 contract. So they could just destroy all the IDs at any time and just kill all the CryptoKitties if they want.
Yeah, I'd recommend that people read the license. It's only 5 paragraphs long, and it's very clear what's going on with it. So it's, take the time, and anyone who's an artist, I would recommend that you take a look at what it is that is going on with the licensing. And the fact that it's called a license versus a sale is an indication that somebody else owns things.
100%.
So, and so this one I want to get back to with regard to tokens themselves. As somebody who's trying to talk to artists about participating in this and taking a chance with tokens, I want to see if the problems that artists were hoping to solve are actually going to be solved. The issues with regard to the fraud, fake copies of their works, getting paid. Now that seems to be one of the probably the best scenario for artists, is that they will eventually get paid. Whether there's a pause button or not is an issue with regard to payments. But are the tokens going to help solve the problems that artists were hoping that the tokens were supposed to solve?
No.
No, Joe.
Probably not.
Correct.
No. What about Tommy? What do you say?
It's going to help artists get paid. That's the only thing that I believe it's going to do.
Depends on what you mean by token, because it's an incremental improvement to have these non-fungible assets representing unique things. whether it be digital or physical. But yeah, I think that non-fungible tokens, like in the Ethereum space, are better for gaming use cases. It doesn't seem like you're just going to automatically get more demand anymore for just putting a token in your artwork. It's more challenging, I think. You got to have that story. That's what people are buying. It's not the token.
Legend.
I think what I'm hearing in general is if you want to just make a token and you want it to be secure, you could probably use Counterparty, and that's good because it'll be around in 10 years. If you want to do a bunch of other things that might be possible later, and you trust the community police to keep everyone on the right track, and you want to do a bunch of crazy stuff that you never knew you wanted before, then jump aboard the ETH train.
If you want to have two tokens to create your token and not really understand how to do it, and then maybe nobody's even going to support that ecosystem in a few months.
Well, you can do that. Well, you can do that on Counterparty.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, so I got into this a little bit with Matt Condon on the Digitally Rare podcast. And you can do a lot of the creative stuff, like breeding crypto kitties. You can do something that to the user looks like they're breeding, say, rare Pepes. And at the end of the day, they have a new rare Pepe asset that's just as rare as the Pepes they started with. That's entirely possible. No one's done that, I'd say, but you can do smart contract type functions in the client using the functions that are available within Counterparty, and with a little creativity, you can do a lot of things that I think people just don't really consider when looking just at Counterparty, just at Ethereum. That when you look at Ethereum, the idea is I want to put everything on chain. I want everything to run on chain, and I guess we know that the shortcomings of that. If there's a bug, now you got an issue, which we've seen multiple Ethereum contracts be hacked and drained because of bugs. And when you drain the contract, it becomes almost worthless, I'd say. So it's a big difference to everybody spinning up their own logic to create tokens in a contract, rather than everybody working off the same platform where the logic is hard coded into the server.
I do think that the Ethereum community needs to do something about that last point, which is we can't be duplicating logic, especially for rare digital art. We need to agree on at least a standard. The Counterparty, I think the Counterparty standard is not the right standard. Even the introduction of the separate token as a core part of the standard. I know that you can create the numeric hashes without that, but that's not what people do. Is in my mind a big issue. But let's put that aside and just say, it is a little ridiculous that there is not a Counterparty equivalent on Ethereum at this point, 3.5 years into Ethereum. And it does lead one to wonder why there isn't. And I think the answer is relatively obvious, which is this: that
Etherparty.
Well, yeah, but
called Fuel. I think.
Dude, that project is so old.
I'm just saying.
I don't even want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it.
Equivalent.
The reason I believe that it doesn't exist is the same reason that the dev tools on Ethereum are good, not great. The same reason MetaMask takes so long to get better, and it's just that a lot of the energy has been sucked up by ICOs, and I really do hope, and I do actually see that changing, that it's just harder to get that done, and people are focusing on other parts of the ecosystem now. But I do think we almost went into a winter in a weird way not really the last 3 months, but the year preceding that, of just everyone trying to think of how to make their ICO and not how to make the Ethereum community better. I see that personally on my end shifting really quickly, and I see people building things again that actually help. But I think that does partially explain that. And that's unfortunate.
That's why I'm
Sorry, the audience is asking for more sound effects. Let me give it to them.
Oh, okay.
All right, there you go.
With Jim's project, the reason why I'm interested in what he's doing, where he has this basically this wrapper idea and the concept that the tokens could potentially live in this wrapper, and that there could be relationships, these cross-platform relationships that are designed because the wrapper is there encompassing all of these different tokens. And it would encourage people to design protocols between token environments, I would think, if it was understood that this is how it's going to work. This is what's going to be beneficial to the consumers. Is they might have a reason. For example, they might want to put their $1 million piece on Counterparty, and they might want to test out and do their marketing on Ethereum. It shouldn't be that as a result there's no communication between these platforms, because it might be useful for somebody, either the artist or the person who's making the purchase, to be able to go to one spot, where all these things live, and people are designing the communication tools between these platforms. So, and I'm not sure if that's what Jim's multidimensional project is working on. That's what I envision it doing. But I'm not sure. I think that would be very, very helpful for your average user, and who wants, at least an artist would want to test out one, perhaps put their $1 million on another one, and seeing how all that works together.
I Can't Smoke a Bitcoin out on James's platform. I put it out on Super Rare. I put it out on Counterparty. So y'all can all get together. It's all out there already.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to describe it, Cynthia, because it is about bringing a new meaning to interoperability. Like, we're all building on the same protocol with 888, as opposed to trying to figure out a way to game the system and make a bunch of money like CryptoKitties. And not that I have anything against them for doing that. You know, they took an opportunity. They've got a really cool product and introduced a game-changing standard that started a lot of really interesting conversations. But I'm more interested in facilitating coordination, and it comes down to making these privately controlled algorithms out there transparent and public utilities, so that everyone can have access to the information they need, extracting knowledge from that, and having a better way to make decisions on that common knowledge. As we increase that exponentially, we're all going to come together, and hopefully, that can foster peace and prosperity, across
the land.
That's the idea.
Hey, Cynthia, where you're at right now, where do you see, if you're recommending an artist to use a blockchain, where do you tell them to go?
I mean, I wish that Counterparty had the as large of a community as Ethereum does, because I think at least it'd be the argument that you could make to artists, because they see the sales of the Ethereum products or the digital art that is remarkable, and so that's what they want to talk about. I'm personally sick of hearing that as the standard, because you should be more concerned about your security of your art, because that's the thing that's going to pay you in your old age. Making sure.
Let's talk. So where do you send them right now? Like as is right now?
I have them. I don't send them to a particular platform. I have them make decisions based on what their goals are, and because one of the things I'm trying to promote with artists is that this is your money, your savings account money. If you don't have security, you don't have a 401k, you're an independent artist, you don't have money coming from other sources, and this is your entire living is based on being an artist, then you have to be strategic, and you might want to look at both. But I'm not too encouraged by the agreements that I've been seeing, and it's really hard to be excited about that, because of course I'm finding more problems than solutions. And so that's been really challenging. So while I like seeing, the human language agreements, I don't like that it's just as bad as looking at the agreements that they were engaging in before.
Let's talk about the development teams and stuff with Ethereum and Counterparty. Some people in the comments have talked about it. I got a message on my phone about it. somebody asked how much development is going on in Counterparty, and why does it seem slow? Joe or Theo, want to talk?
Well, I think that there's simply a lot less funding for the Counterparty project if you compare that with some of the Ethereum projects. That's one thing. Despite that, there's still enough for it to keep going, and also I think that I can't give a really good technical update on the current status of something like SegWit integration, which is something that Counterparty has been, that's one of the in 2 weeks things that's been going on for a while. I think SegWit integration and one more proposal are the next ones. The next one's in line. But yeah, I mean, it's like with every community, there's times when, people, some people maybe leave and go to another project, or there's not, a whole bunch of money, and people are doing it out of love, and they have to work other side jobs too. So that sometimes is one reason why
there's no money in Counterparty development.
Also, there's another reason why it's quote slow, is because, for example, there was a lot of work on the virtual machine stuff, like around 2016, and yeah, but it turns out that it's people decided it's not secure enough to do. So rather than take the chance, and add that and add vulnerabilities to the system, they decided, no, we're not going to do that. So that was like something that was worked on and talked about a lot. And then in the end, it didn't even happen. So there's a lot of emphasis on what I would call the stone tablet, immutability, and not smashing your stone tablet to make it a stone tablet that has a self-driving car too.
Yeah, I think Theo has kind of hit the nail on the head with that. I think Counterparty's been a little victim of its own stability as a platform. Everybody's pretty happy with how it works, so no one's in a rush to change it. There's been a lot of work, people that have kind of come up with different ideas. The last big update was, I think, 9-10 months ago. That's when enhanced sends were added to the protocol, which removed all the dust, which used to be an issue in sending assets in Counterparty. Yeah, I think it just works. So there's not a lot of there's developers working on projects on Counterparty, but rather than focus on the core client, that focus has been going towards individual projects, and it's a much smaller community. I mean, Counterparty was founded with a burn. It wasn't founded with an ICO like Ethereum. So there's no Ethereum Foundation spinning off stuff like Consensus with 1,100 employees. I heard a few days ago.
Ridiculous.
And I think but I think it is a little telling that we're here having a conversation about one platform that has maybe 20, 30 developers, maybe total working on it, versus one that has thousands of developers. And the conclusion that we've come to is, if you're going to do a really expensive piece, probably do it on Counterparty because it's built on Bitcoin.
I said Bitcoin, not Counterparty. And I probably use Counterparty. The thing that is really important to emphasize here that is not being underscored enough, because I think the point that you just made about if you do the really expensive piece, do it on Bitcoin and maybe use Counterparty is, I think, important. But the other piece of this is, like, the Ethereum community is big and continues to grow. And if you're somebody who's going to rely on a big diverse community that has like
so Tommy, when did
the
Ethereum community really begin to grow? About the time the price began to grow, right?
It's a fair point to say we don't know what's going to happen in the next year or two. Another reason why,
if we have a price dive, what's going to happen to the Ethereum community?
I think the Ethereum community is pretty well funded, actually, ironically, in US dollars. And so I think it's actually relatively unlikely that it will shrink by orders of magnitude. It might shrink, but I don't think it's going to shrink by orders of magnitude.
Now,
and
don't you think that's interesting that it's US dollars? So what's holding them to Ethereum and not something like EOS?
That's the biggest threat is that people give up on censorship resistance, period. And that maybe that wasn't what the Ethereum community was really about in the first place. If that turns out to be the case, then I think that's going to be bad. I don't even see a whiff of that among the people I know building on Ethereum, though. I mean, I really am paying attention for it. I don't even see a whiff of it.
So why did you pick Ethereum over Ethereum Classic?
When because I'm always looking for something that solves the problem now and that I think has the most sustainable growing future. And Ethereum was at the time, I thought the Ethereum decision was the right decision. I thought it was always the case that like the roadmap was like, this is a Turing complete thing. There's going to be in the first year or two, some big fuck ups, and our plan will be to sort of solve for those and then sort of at not even sort of, but very specifically at a certain point to say it's mostly out of our hands. And you're seeing that now with the wallet that starts with a P hack that they're trying to reverse, and it's even simpler than the previous one. It's not even hack. It's just like money that's locked up, and they could just unlock it, and they're still not even able to get that through. So I had observed that, and I thought that had a better future. And then I thought Ethereum Classic without Barry Silbert, basically, and I think this is basically true, without Barry Silbert, like nobody would be funding it, nobody would be working on it. There would be no Ethereum Classic to speak of. But because it is the case that if there is one rich person funding something, it can survive. And we see that with Bitcoin Cash, and we see that with Ethereum Classic. But I sort of was of the opinion
you don't think that's also true with Ethereum to some extent?
No, I think there's a lot of rich people funding Ethereum at this point. It is Joe Lubin has a lot to do with it, but I think there's a lot of rich people funding Ethereum at this point. And by the way, if I was going to build on Ethereum Classic, I would have built on Counterparty. If you're going down that route, which is like,
that's pretty interesting. So that's interesting. So I think the reason I think that's really interesting is because I thought you liked Ethereum because of the capabilities of the virtual machine, and Ethereum Classic has that. So why would you have chosen Counterparty over Ethereum Classic?
Because imagine somebody making the decision between Ethereum and Ethereum Classic and choosing Ethereum Classic for the reasons you might choose Ethereum Classic, like better, more reliable source of truth, more ideologically pure, etc. I can't imagine a person making that decision and then not going the full 9 yards and saying, fuck the functionality. If that's what I really care about, I should put it on the blockchain that will always exist, if any blockchain exists, and put it on the Bitcoin blockchain. Like, I can't imagine somebody having the Ethereum mindset in late 2016, early 2017, when I was thinking about Rare Art Labs and what we're doing, what mostly they're doing, but what I help when I can. I can't imagine going through that thought process and that idea maze, deciding to pick Ethereum Classic, and then not going and then not saying, the reasons you'd pick Ethereum Classic are reasons to actually just not pick Ethereum in the first place and work on Bitcoin. That's kind of my point of view about it.
So now put yourself in the shoes of an artist that knows nothing about any of this. What are you going to choose? The more stable thing or the more unstable thing that might have some potential in the future?
I think the more popular thing that has a lot of stability is a no-brainer for me. It's not even, to me, for like a low end artist, like the investment in the Ethereum rare digital art community, problematic though it may be, is a much more fertile ground. If I was building something like that could draw more of a cult or niche following, though, like Bitcoins or Rare Pepe, I actually do still think that I would go the passionate but not large route of the Counterparty.
So you would build on Ethereum to leverage the current Ethereum community. Why wouldn't you, as an artist, why would you care about the Ethereum community? Don't you just care about your fans?
I believe the Ethereum community is building infrastructure that would make it much easier for your fans to both become educated, become onboarded, and become users and ongoing users, as well as the fact that the Ethereum community is much more likely to bring you new fans. Not to mention that the Ethereum dApps will have increasingly interesting functionality and interoperability. So the assets created now on standards that at least are likely to continue to exist. Those assets, if they become popular, will be supported by an ecosystem that'll be much richer. And we're already seeing that in the case of like the CryptoPunks, for example, and God forbid the CryptoKitties, which have multiple third-party reseller platforms like OpenSea, and I always forget the other one, and a few of the others. And just there's a extremely rich ecosystem of compatible third-party apps, kitty hats, etc. for CryptoKitties. Again, God help us. But I think that's an investment that's going to pay off. If you're building kind of core rare digital art, I think that's an investment that's going to pay off in building a fan base, especially on that platform. That would not pay off as much on the counterparty ecosystem. Although if I was building something that I felt like was very much in the wheelhouse of the counterparty ecosystem, from what I can see, that's still a fertile ground and an ecosystem that can support certain kinds of things. But it seems to only support a very specific kind of niche thing. But it does support that extremely well. And then technically has a structure that I find very appealing, but it's not.
So I want to drive home the point though that you're making in that the advantage to using Ethereum as an artist is you have access to this community of people that use Ethereum, right? So you're creating this token, and you get access to this community now.
At the moment, at this moment, right this second, that is the advantage. Yes, that is the investment that you.
Okay, so I don't necessarily think that that's an advantage. I think that's a handicap, because what that does is it kind of pushes you into this market of people that may not be your fans. They're fans of Ethereum, right? So one of the things that I saw with Rare Pepes that I thought was really interesting, and I think I really succeeded at, was obfuscating out counterparty from the wallet itself. And most of the people that use Rare Pepe wallet came from outside of the counterparty community and may not even know that they're interacting with counterparty. And I think that if you really want acceptance among the general public and not just crypto people, you got to forget about the crypto community as your target audience. It's not. Your target audience is as an artist is your fans. And they may not be into crypto. So they just want to buy your digital piece. And that's it. I think that kind of focus on Ethereum is a little misguided, because at the end of the day, I think people should probably, if you're an artist and you create a token, you shouldn't be selling it for Ethereum. You shouldn't be selling it for counterparty. You should be selling it for dollars. You should create a token, spool up a Shopify store and sell them that way. It's up to the developers to integrate stuff like that. But really, ideally, your customers buying this token only see it as this rare digital object, and not part of some community that they don't care about.
Who's more likely to integrate US dollar transitions for buying rare digital goods? The Ethereum community, which it would require a payment processor, a platform compatibility, UX, and etc. Like, who's more likely to do that, the Ethereum community or the counterparty community? And it's obvious that it's Ethereum.
So that's kind of
that's up to the artists themselves.
It's neither here. Yeah, exactly. That's the artist's decision.
You're saying spin up a Shopify store and sell people digital goods and crypto goods and just transfer them after you receive the payment, which is strictly against the terms of service of every payment processor in America. That's not going to happen. You're going to need a crypto payment processor to allow that. I can promise you'll be shut off if you try to do that.
So now say I'm an artist and I sell things in a gallery. Can I sell them for dollars?
Yeah, you do not need a payment processor to facilitate that. No.
Okay, so say I'm an artist and I sell things at a festival. Do I need a payment processor for that?
You could do it by getting like a Square reader, and they would never know what it was that you were buying or selling. But that's a card present transaction, which is not subject to the same T's and C's. You're not going to be able to sell. I just like, this is a guarantee, hard stop. You will not get away with selling crypto assets using an existing Stripe or anything payment processor. If you reach any scale, they'll shut you off, and probably shut you off as soon as they find out what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that no one's tried that.
They should try it. Fuck them, right? Like, just do it.
Isn't there a counterparty platform that accepts dollars for cards?
I mean, like a dollar swap bot? I don't know of one. I mean, you'd have to use Tether or something like that,
Yeah,
I guess.
I thought that Bitcoins, you were able to buy certain crops with dollars at one point using PayPal.
I mean, there's no reason why you can't make a. What if I just make a Rare Pepe gift card and then make a WordPress internet shop and take PayPal to sell my gift cards? I don't see an issue with that.
Yeah, I don't see an issue with it either. I think no one's done it. I think you could sell open dimes with Rare Pepes on them. And
that you could do.
Yeah, and I think that's where anyone really serious about this should probably think about. But I think what the point I'm trying to make is that it doesn't matter if it's an Ethereum token or a counterparty token to the artist, probably at the end of the day. And all that information should probably be obfuscated away from their users also.
Right.
So then you get back to, all right, so where do I create the token? Well, I might, in my opinion, I would want to create the token in the ecosystem where the rules are defined and there's no bending of the rules from project to project, which is Counterparty. But to kind of like take it around to why that's not happening now is because we're in our niche communities, and it's easier and less risky to just sell them for crypto, right? But
Right.
I don't.
If we get into that dollar ecosystem, it's going to be different. I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think if we're looking a little longer term and we're looking outside of where we find ourselves in our little internet communities, if we're looking at like digital scarcity and digitally scarce objects, it really the market is not our immediate communities. The market is the general public. So I think that's kind of an important thing to think about if you're an artist. Kind of consider that. But yeah, I mean, to get back to the Ethereum and kind of one thing that I brought up with Open Dimes, an interesting thing about Counterparty is you can leverage all the technology that's built for Bitcoin because it is Bitcoin. So you can leverage things like an Open Dime, which is it's basically a physical bearer bond. So you could put assets on this little USB stick and trade the stick. So you get a lot of functionality there without even having to. It's Bitcoin, right? It's not you just get it automatically because Counterparty lives on Bitcoin. So
you can do off-chain trading with Counterparty assets.
Absolutely. Can
you do that with Ethereum?
Yeah.
I don't. Is there? You could, yeah, but there's no Open Dime implementation for Ethereum, is there?
You can use like a Trezor, right, or like some other
Trezor, yeah, you could hit, but I think because the breaking of the
private key
Open
part
Dime.
is what the Open Dime. You're creating a private key without the artist isn't creating it.
So what Sasha asked, how do you check if the thing is on the Open Dime? Well, the Open Dime creates essentially a bearer bond out of anything on it, because you can see you can inspect what's on an Open Dime by inserting it into a computer via USB port. But if anything is removed from the OpenDime, then you notice that it's been tampered with. It's very clear. So it's a tamper-resistant physical object that turns anything on it into a bearer bond, basically.
And nobody knows what the private key is until it's time
until you break it, right?
Exactly, right. So if anyone even the artist that put it on there doesn't have control of the private key.
This is one of the most, and I know Joe uses this, but this is probably one of the most innovative ways of engaging artists in this process, because it's a physical thing that is interacting with the crypto universe, and you're using tools that you already have in front of you on a regular basis. I think OpenDime, at least my understanding of it, is underutilized. I think more 100%. Folks should use it on a regular basis.
And we need to make it compatible with Ethereum, for God's sake. Here's the other thing I'm going to criticize the Ethereum community for. There's a lot of damn good ideas from the Bitcoin and counterparty community that should just be implemented. You know, what are you guys doing?
James, what do you think about OpenDime?
I think it's a good example of how to use the tokens you can make on Bitcoin using counterparty or not. But that's kind of what I'm more interested in, is how you use the tokens, not how you create them. And I'd say that very soon it's going to be just as easy, if not easier, to create these kind of things on Ethereum. We've already seen platforms like Tommy's project and Super Rare. There's marketplaces like OpenSea/Rarebits, and like there's great ways to use them, like games and Nifty Gallery for like showing off your collections. I know Matt Condon and crew are working on all sorts of crazy ideas that are going to change the world. So that's what I'm more interested in. If you're an artist who's just interested in selling art, maybe just go sell a painting, or figure out a better way to monetize other than slinging scarce tokens. But that's a viable monetization strategy for sure. I just don't think it's much different than selling art in the first place.
Somebody from CryptoKitties just liked the link to this video on Twitter, and I just really hope they don't watch it, but I think they're going to. I gotta go in a couple minutes. Should we do conclusions? What do you guys think?
So hold on, let me ask you a question. Is there a way that some like DJ Pepe could live on Ethereum where it's part of something but it has different use cases, and like Takara or with the Mandel Duck Saratobi game or the SoundCloud private page or any of that? Can it be a cross-platform thing for an artist like me?
I'm not sure. Like, we could think through some implementations, but the thing I'm more interested in, and I actually talked to Joe about this a decent amount, and I don't know where this is going to go.
Before you get what you're interested in, can that happen with Ethereum?
Yeah, I don't think that you could make it strictly. I think you could make an application that was counterparty or Ethereum agnostic, and it just was rare digital art, and like it can come from any platform, and you could make a wallet that could interact with either.
Well, Book of Orbs is doing that. They have Ethereum and counterparty.
Right. I think that's how you would achieve that. I don't think you would want to make a truly. I know they have this. What are the bridges that they try to make? But I'm not really too bullish on those like Ethereum Bitcoin bridge ideas. There isn't one. But
what I'm saying is that a token on XCP, I can as a user, I can do cross-platform different stuff with it right now. Is that possible with Ethereum right now?
Oh, if you had created it on Ethereum, yes. If you had created it on Ethereum, you could do that. You could do all the stuff you do on XCP. Yeah, sure, you could do that. I thought you were talking about take DJ Pepe on Counterparty and try to make use of it on Ethereum. Not that I know.
Like, you're talking about token access control?
Yeah, stuff like exactly. Yeah, and like cross-platform where it's
Definitely.
like I know like even like Adam Levine put something from my token on one of his songs on it without my. I didn't do that. You know what I mean? Like, is that all possible with Ethereum? Like, what is that called? I don't even know what it's called. But
yeah, I think anything you could do with those tokens on Counterparty, I don't think there would be. I think it might even. I don't think there would be anything that would stop you from doing that on Ethereum for sure.
Okay.
So what exactly can you do with Counterparty that you can't do with Ethereum?
Well, for me, I can't create a token using Ethereum. I have to create it in a platform, either Rare Art Labs.
I know something.
Can't smoke a Bitcoin. You've already done it.
Right.
Yeah, but there's no GUI for just like doing
I
it.
token on XCP, and then I use it across all platforms by doing different projects on each platform to promote the token, to promote the project. So the token was more like a blockchain trophy, but then when I did Super Rare, I did a print for it, a moving print, and then I use your multi-dimensional tokens with CreateBid video and to get views. Like I've tried a couple different platforms, but that's not the token going over there. That's like my project, and I'm using several different.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, given that ease of use has been ironed out by the Counterparty team and folks like Joe, and you know, that's definitely an argument to make. But my question is really about, like, is it possible to do anything on Counterparty that is impossible to do with Ethereum? Because I think it's all kind of right around the corner with regard to user experience.
I think a good point with that is it's important to look at whose perspective of what's possible. So sure, technically it's possible, but as a user, what are my expectations using one platform to the other? Do I need to basically like wait for somebody to come in and smarter than me and audit and the Ethereum contract that I want to interact with to make sure it is doing the exact same thing that Counterparty is very open and clear that it's doing? So as a user, it's much clearer as to what the limitations are and what you're using and what the possibilities are when you use Counterparty. In Ethereum, it's very obfuscated because you're trusting each individual contract author to have encoded things honestly without bugs, and also are explaining basically the functionality of their contract in a way that is aligning your expectations with what you're really getting. And I think that something like CryptoKitties hasn't done that very well. And I think that's clear from kind of what we've seen and discovered over the last few weeks. And I think a lot of Ethereum contracts, even a lot of ERC20 tokens, have centralized control built into them that the users don't know about. And whether that's good or bad or not, and whether people even care, I think if you were to take the average person and tell them, hey, did you know that like this could happen? They would say, oh no, I didn't realize that. Like, I didn't realize that this platform that's been telling me the whole time that I control my tokens and I have them can essentially pause the contract to prevent me from transferring them and then upgrade the contract so that I no longer own them. I think people would be surprised to find that out. And with Ethereum, there is such a level of trust in each individual contract author that they're delivering what they say they are. And in practice, that isn't really happening right now. And I don't know how you do a better job at that in a way that the user can really trust and have the proper expectations for each platform, because that just even the way that tokens are named based on these very loose standards like ERC 721 and ERC 20, that you can conform to the standard and have functionality that centralizes your token. Right. It's still that token, but it's called the same thing as one that could potentially be decentralized in a way that the contract author doesn't have control. And in Counterparty, it's literally just one parameter that you can check if it's set or not.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it could be communicated better, but like I said earlier, it's possible to create a decentralized smart contract, and you can do this sort of roadmap where you got progressively, more and more people who control the top level contract of a given protocol. So yeah, I think it's definitely a problem, but people are starting to learn, and it is kind of on the investor to do their due diligence, so that they can know for sure that the contracts.
But how do you do that? How would you solve that issue?
You can formally verify contracts. Like it's not impossible to develop a good smart contract either. That idea of like it being hackable is like it's up to the developer. Like you gotta trust the developer to agree, and that's kind of what buying into the network implies. But it's not like a fundamental problem of ERC 20 or ERC 721. I'd
argue it is a fundamental problem, and the fundamental problem is that you have to trust the individual contract author. And in something like Counterparty, you don't.
Well,
you don't have to trust the token issuer.
You can set that and like send it to an address and eliminate that control. So then it's truly a decentralized contract.
Should we do we're at 2 hours. Should we do conclusions? What do you guys think?
Yeah, we probably should wrap this up here. Have we touched on pretty much everything that we needed to touch on a little bit, or?
I think so.
Anybody got any other? So, from my conclusion, tell me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like it depends on what you're trying to do as an artist, right? At this very moment, about what you would use. Am I right or wrong?
I think you're right on that. I think you can make these are stylistic and functionality differences, and that's the artist. No matter what, the artist has to become educated about what tools they're using, and there's going to be a preference. But the deception is my biggest concern. Everything else, the functionality, all of that, is not as important to me as making sure that there's no deception and that there's opportunity to be educated about how these things work. Because if you are going to have your livelihood depend on these platforms, there has to be a way to learn about it.
Yep.
Yeah, what do you think?
I think Counterparty. It's nifty.
James, have you come away with any different point of views here today?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think that we all knew before this it would be a friendly debate, not necessarily a battle royale. But yeah, it's all about the use case.
Dude, this was a battle royale. I have to prove it.
Hey, exactly.
All right.
And then Skrilla can't
maybe
pause.
the gloves didn't come off like some of the fans wanted, but this was a battle royale. Y'all chose.
Theos is a scam. Theos is a scam.
Your opportunity. This is the ring. All right. So the battle royale happened. Right. How you presented yourself here is up to y'all.
Well, I think it was an excellent use of our time, and hopefully, others learned something. I definitely learned something. I'll say that. I didn't mean to say that I hadn't learned. But yeah, I more or less just. Always learning, so that didn't change.
Joe, has any sway happened in your stance as public enemy #1?
No, I think I still dislike Ethereum to the same extent that I disliked it prior to this conversation.
Tommy, the crowd thinks that you might have gone the XCP direction, but they think that you did the best job. From what I'm reading the comments wise.
Look, I think
be undercover XCP here though.
I think that the one thing that that has got my mind going is thinking about, if you remove the artist from the crypto ecosystem, but you just want to create the concept of a rare digital artwork. So just imagine the pieces that are already in museums now that are like, these exist. There's like movies on physical hardware, and the artist just promises they've only made 10 of these, and they sign that and they sell those. That already exists. There are like high art pieces that are like that. I've always thought that the natural extension of that is just to do that, but put it on a blockchain. And really, it's not part of the blockchain ecosystem, but it's just the concept that it is on a blockchain, and you could prove that. Would be very interesting. It would be something that would sell. The one thing that does have my head going right now is, right now in this moment, which blockchain would you put that on? And I think that's up for debate. Long term, I think the investment needs to be in the Ethereum ecosystem. I think that unless they screw up the actual consensus mechanism of that blockchain, and if proof of stake happens and doesn't work, I think it will work even if it happens. But I think if it happens and doesn't work, that's the only risk. I think otherwise that's the way to invest if you're an artist. And I also think that the tools and the companies and the sort of platforms that will be built around that will be better. I will leave with this though. It has been my goal, and I hope to continue to encourage the platforms that I have influence over to build platforms that are actually at least somewhat compatible in some way with the various blockchains. I want wallets that I can view my counterparty assets and my Ethereum assets in the same place, and functionality to trade them in at least a somewhat compatible way. And I don't think counterparty and Bitcoin-based rare digital art assets are going anywhere. I just think the ecosystem around Ethereum is easier to build on for a developer, not for an individual user trying to make one token. I think it's better for a developer. I think it's a ecosystem that will grow in a richer way, and I still think it's 100% the way to invest your time. But I'm not a maximalist in any way, other than just trying to decide where to spend my time and where to advise people to spend theirs.
All right. Well, I appreciate you all for coming out to this battle royale. We have the winner. The winner is Tommy. Tommy won. I think Tommy won on the merit of him being very well spoken about the Ethereum stuff, but also having to dip his toes in the XCP fandom. Won him some hearts from the XCPers as well, watching his chat. So we give it up to Tommy. And
I'm getting the kisses from the bitches.
I'll get Tommy and James's counterparty wallet so I can send them a Battle Royale token.
It was all Tommy. I'm just glad he gave me the opportunity for it.
James, I had to have you here because, and this is, I'll tell you, not just because you're extremely well spoken on the topic, but also because like I don't, on the more complex, like deeper smart contract stuff about Ethereum, I don't spend that much time there. And I know that's such an important part of thinking about why you might invest in Ethereum. So I had to have somebody with the sort of web of a mind that you have thinking about the multi-dimensional tokens and all that stuff. So couldn't have done it without you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you saying that. That was really nice.
I think Skrilla just had to even
it
up though to keep the drama going though. He just had to even it up so the drama would continue. So it'd be 1-1.
Well, Tommy won for XCP, so I'm all with that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the winner today is the winner came down to the most in the middle. I think Theo's kind of in the middle a little too, even though he's more XCP lenient. But the way I think Tommy went with explaining Ethereum and then falling back on XCP, he had the crowd right in his hands. So they were cheering you on there, Tom.
I had the most dogs.
Yeah. So good debate, guys. Appreciate it. I don't know if any of your last words go through it all. We're all good.
I love these guys. Love just getting every opportunity to do these. I learned so much, and in the moment I might not always have a takeaway, but I always have one the next day. So,
all right, give a plug to your site real quick.
rareart.io, dap.rareart.io if you want to check out some of the art. Lots of good things happening. Full-time crew over there just cranking away, doing great stuff.
Joe.
Me? Theos.gallery. You can witness firsthand one of the first ever rare autograph on the Bitcoin blockchain. Check it out. It's a NFT on the Bitcoin blockchain.
All right. Theos.
Wow.
What's your site, James?
You go to create.xyz, CRE8.xyz, and that's our new governance platform. And video is CRE8bid.io.
And Joe's is rarepepewallet.com. I think he's
No, sounds good. Sounds good to me.
You get an automatic wallet.
And everybody follow and listen.
Easiest
on the blockchain.
Easiest wallet to use. Much easier than MetaMask.
Agree. Agree.
All
All
right,
right, boys.
Adios,
Take it
guys.
easy, guys.
Signing off.
Good night.